In a small, quiet village stood an old house, inhabited by a family consisting of a father, a mother, and their 4 sons. The youngest son, Sami, was a kind-hearted and calm boy, but he always felt different from his 3 brothers. They kept their distance from him, ignored him, and deliberately annoyed him in various ways. While his brothers played together, Sami would sit alone in the garden, carving small figures out of wood. If he tried to approach them, they would mock him or invent a task to send him away. He met their actions with a faint smile, as if it didn't concern him, but inside he felt an intense loneliness. One day, as he was carrying a cup of hot milk, his middle brother intentionally bumped into him. The cup fell from his hand and shattered. The brothers laughed, while Sami quietly bent down to pick up the broken glass. When his mother came in and asked what had happened, he simply said he hadn't been paying attention and had dropped it himself. He never wanted to cause trouble. The incidents repeated. Another morning, he was trying to fix his favorite wooden toy when his eldest brother came, snatched it from him, and threw it away, saying, "Why do you care about these trivial things?" Sami felt sad, but he didn't argue. He went, picked up his toy, and silently put it back together. Even in the simplest details of life, like the dinner table, they would intentionally swap his seat whenever he tried to sit, until he ended up alone at the corner of the table. He could see them laughing quietly, but he said nothing. His father noticed this constant silence, but didn't ask, as he was used to Sami being a quiet boy who never complained. It wasn't limited to the house. One day, Sami decided to go to the nearby river to fish. He loved sitting there, listening to the sound of the water and contemplating the trees. But he was surprised to see his brothers following him, not to play with him, but to take his fishing rod, saying they wanted to use it. As usual, he didn't object. He just sat and watched them as they tried to fish, unsuccessfully. Days passed, and the harassment continued. They hid his notebooks, tied his shoelaces together, and took his share of a treat. He knew his parents wouldn't allow this if they knew, but he didn't want to be the cause of conflict in the house, even if it was at the expense of his own comfort. One night, while everyone was asleep, Sami sat by the window looking at the stars, wondering why his brothers hated him. He had done nothing wrong to them, yet he always felt unwanted. He wished things were different, but he didn't know how to make them accept him. As the days went on, Sami started to notice something new: his father's gaze. The father was watching his brother's behavior in silence, and it seemed as though something was about to happen. The days passed, and the sons grew older. But the 3 brothers' treatment of Sami did not change. He remained in the shadows, working in the field, and helping his father silently and without complaint, while they spent their time playing, caring for nothing but themselves. One day, their father fell gravely ill. Sami rushed to take care of him, bringing him water and food, and staying by his side every night. As for his brothers, they avoided staying with him for long periods. They knew their father was no longer as strong as he used to be, but that didn't mean much to them. On a sad morning, the father passed away. The house filled with sorrow, and their mother wept bitterly, while Sami stood by his father's bed, unable to believe what had happened. As for the 3 brothers, despite their superficial sadness, something else occupied their thoughts: the large inheritance their father had left behind. A few days after the burial, the 3 brothers gathered in the large room, discussing how to divide the wealth. Sami sat far away, knowing well that none of them would pay him any attention. They whispered and argued, and then finally, the eldest brother looked at him and said coldly, "You deserve nothing. You were never like us, and you were never part of us." Sami was stunned by his brother's words. He hadn't expected much, but he had hoped for a little justice. Their mother tried to intervene, but they silenced her harshly, saying they knew what they were doing. Then they stood before him and told him with clear finality, "You have no place here anymore. Take your things and leave." Sami looked at his mother, but she stood helpless, weak against the tyranny of her older sons. In that moment, Sami felt like a stranger in his own home, the place he had lived his entire life. He had no other choice. He went to his room, gathered the few tools he used in the field, put them in an old bag, and then walked out of the house without looking back. The air was cold, and night was beginning to fall. He didn't know where to go, nor where he would spend his first night. His hands gripped his tools tightly. They were the only things he owned now. He walked slowly, hearing nothing but the sound of his footsteps on the dirt road. The road was long, and the farther he got from the house, the heavier his heart felt. He didn't feel anger, but a deep sadness, as if his whole life had been overturned in an instant. He knew he couldn't go back, and that he had to find his own way. He looked up at the sky, and the stars were shining, as if whispering something to him that he couldn't yet understand. He took a deep breath and continued walking, searching for a place to start anew. On that cold night, Sami sat on the edge of the road, alone and betrayed. He raised his hands to the sky and prayed for God to be by his side, for he had no place to seek refuge but in his Creator's mercy, and he owned nothing but the tools he carried. The hours passed slowly, and the night was long and harsh. He tried to sleep on the pavement, but the biting cold would wake him from time to time. He remained silent, staring at the sky as if it were his only remaining hope. As dawn began to break, his body exhausted and his eyes heavy from lack of sleep, he suddenly heard the sound of approaching footsteps. It was an old merchant walking with his cart loaded with fabrics. When the merchant spotted Sami sleeping on the ground in such a state, he stopped and approached him. "Young man, why are you sleeping in the street?" the merchant asked in a warm voice. Sami slowly opened his eyes, feeling ashamed of his situation, but he decided to tell the kind man the truth. He told him about his brother's injustice and how they had thrown him out of the house, leaving him with nothing. The merchant was moved by his story and looked at him with deep sadness. "No one deserves to live this way," the merchant said. "Come with me and I will help you." Sami got up and followed the merchant, hardly believing what was happening. The merchant led him to his small shop in the market, a store that sold fine fabrics brought from distant cities. The merchant gave him a small room behind the shop, with a wooden bed and a warm blanket, and said, "This will be your room, and from now on, you work with me. You will learn how to sell fabric and deal with customers." Sami felt a profound gratitude flood his heart, and couldn't find the words to express his thanks. Sami began his first day at work by observing the merchant as he sold, listening to his pleasant conversations with customers, and seeing how he chose the right fabric for each person. At first it was difficult for him, but he didn't give up. He started memorizing the names and types of fabrics and learned the art of persuading customers and capturing their attention. He would wake up early every day to clean the shop and arrange the fabrics meticulously until he became an essential part of the business. As the days passed, Sami became more confident, and the old merchant began to rely on him heavily. Customers grew fond of Sami because of his profound kindness and evident honesty, and the shop began to thrive more than ever before. One time, a man came asking for a rare type of fabric that wasn't in the shop. Instead of simply apologizing, Sami promised him he would search for it and find it as quickly as possible. Sami set off for the grand market, searched among the merchants until he found the exact fabric required, and returned with it to the shop. The merchant was impressed by Sami's intelligence and quick thinking, smiling at him and saying, "You are no longer just an employee to me, Sami. You have become a real merchant." For the first time in his life, Sami felt proud. He was no longer that withdrawn boy his brothers treated with contempt. He had become a young man of value, self-reliant and with a place in this world. Over time, the merchant began to treat him like a son, teaching him the finest secrets of the trade, how to buy at the best prices and how to distinguish the quality of fabrics just by touching them. One day, the merchant told him he had to leave on a long journey to acquire goods and asked him to manage the entire shop in his absence. This was the first time Sami had shouldered such a significant responsibility on his own. But he didn't feel fear, only a sense of challenge. He opened the shop as usual, greeted customers with his customary smile, and negotiated with merchants with the wisdom he had gained from his mentor. When the merchant returned weeks later, he found that Sami had not only managed the shop successfully, but had also managed to increase its profits. The old merchant laughed and said, "It seems I'll be leaving the shop to you soon. You run it better than I do." Sami smiled shyly, but he felt inside that he had finally found his rightful place in this life. After Sami had become an expert in the arts of sales and commerce and felt he was fully capable of relying on himself, he sat down one night with the old merchant. He said to him with all respect and appreciation, "My uncle, I have learned so much from you, and thanks to you, I am standing on my own feet. Now, I want to take my first step toward independence and open a small shop of my own." The merchant looked at him with love and pride, then smiled and said, "This is what I was waiting for from you, my son. You have the intelligence and the will, and I am confident you will succeed." The merchant did not hesitate to help his loyal apprentice. He helped him find a small shop in one of the market's alleys, and even gave him a quantity of fabric to start his business with. Sami began to set up his shop with enthusiasm. He arranged the fabrics with meticulous care and chose the best types that would attract customers. He worked tirelessly, waking before dawn to go to the wholesale merchants and select the best goods, then returning to sell them in his shop at fair prices and with a cheerful face. Over time, people began to notice the quality of his merchandise and his absolute honesty in dealings. Little by little, his small shop began to flourish. Sami's fame and respect among the people grew, and his shop became a destination for those seeking fine fabrics. He started earning money, but he never forgot his difficult days. He saved his money and wisely reinvested it in his business until his shop grew and became one of the most famous in the market. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, his brothers were living off the inheritance they had seized. They spent the money lavishly on trivial things, traveling and spending without measure, believing this money would never run out. They didn't bother to work or build a source of income, as they were relying entirely on the wealth their father had left. The years passed, and the money began to dwindle without them noticing. At first, they didn't care, but over time, their lives began to change. They could no longer buy whatever they wished, and they had no investments or projects to bring them income. They were left with only one thing: the large house they had inherited. They lived in it without thinking about the future, until they realized that if they didn't find another source of money, they might lose even this house. One day, the three brothers sat together, looking at each other anxiously. One of them said, worried, "What are we going to do? We have nothing left but this house, and even food has become difficult to buy." The others looked at each other in silence, for they knew the only remaining solution was one they would find very difficult to accept.
After years of struggle and perseverance, Sami became one of the biggest merchants in the village. He was no longer that weak boy who was mercilessly kicked out of his home, but rather a man of status and respect, who had built a large house befitting his new position. But amidst all this success, he never forgot the days he spent alone on the street, nor did he forget his brother's injustice toward him. Most importantly, he never forgot his mother, the only woman who remained in his heart, even when she could not defend him. One day, Sami decided to return to his father's old house. He wasn't going for his brothers, but for his mother. As he approached the house, he felt a mixture of conflicting emotions, but he remained steadfast. He knocked on the door, and when it opened, his three brothers stood before him. Signs of utter astonishment were on their faces. They saw their little brother whom they used to mock, but this time he was completely different. He was a successful, elegant, and strong man, with features of confidence and self-esteem on his face. The brothers stammered and didn't know what to say, but they quickly tried to salvage the situation by apologizing. One of them said, "Forgive us, brother. We were wrong." The other said, "We didn't know you would become this successful. We were fools." As for the third, he tried to speak, but Sami paid them no attention. He had moved past them a long time ago, and no longer needed their empty words. Without answering them, Sami entered the house, looking for his mother. He found her sitting in her old room, the features of time and exhaustion clear on her face. But when she saw him, her eyes lit up with a happiness she hadn't felt in years. Sami hurried toward her, knelt down, and kissed her hand with all love and respect. He said in a warm voice, "Mother, I have returned for you. I want you to come with me to live in my new home, where I will take care of you as you used to take care of me." His mother held his face tenderly, and her tears flowed silently. She said, "I knew you would be all right, but my heart remained with you all these years." Without hesitation, she gathered her simple belongings and left with Sami, leaving behind the house where she no longer had a place. The three brothers stood at the door, watching her leave with their brother, knowing full well that this day was the inevitable result of their injustice and greed. They tried to speak again, but Sami didn't even look back. He got into the carriage with his mother and headed toward his new home, where a different life awaited them, a life filled with love and respect, with no place for injustice or betrayal. As for his brothers, they remained in their old house, overwhelmed with regret, realizing they had lost a brother who would never have let them down. If only they had treated him as he deserved.
Share your opinion with us. Was what Sami did to his brothers the right thing, or should he have forgiven them for what they did to him? And in the end, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to receive everything new, God willing, inshallah.